He was known as the Monster, a man with an ordinary appearance, an easy smile, moving like a shadow across 3 countries. His specialty was girls, children and teenagers, many of them indigenous, poor, invisible to the system. He confessed to killing more than 300. 300. But the real number may be a secret that only the Andes know. This is the story of Pedro Alonso López, the man who may be the most prolific serial killer in modern history. 1970s, South America. While the world was living through the Cold War, a silent and terrifying tragedy was unfolding in the border regions of Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia. Girls began disappearing from public markets, dusty streets, remote villages. Local authorities, often unprepared and disorganized, treated the cases as isolated incidents. The poverty and marginalization of indigenous communities meant that many of these disappearances weren't even recorded. It was the perfect hunting ground for a predator. If you're enjoying this journey through the darkest cases in history, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss our upcoming documentaries. Pedro Alonso López was born in Colombia in 1948. He described a childhood of extreme poverty and violence, claiming he was thrown out of his home after being sexually assaulted. This narrative, impossible to fully verify, paints the portrait of a child who quickly became a dangerous adult. He lived as a thief and smuggler, roaming the roads and trails of the Andes. His method was brutally simple. He approached his victims in busy areas with low vigilance. He used superficial charm, offered help or food. Sometimes he simply grabbed them in a moment of distraction. He strangled or suffocated them, often after sexual assault, and then he left the bodies in shallow graves, by riverbanks, or simply abandoned them in the relentless vastness of the Andes. He viewed indigenous girls as disposable. In his own words, no one would look for them, and for a terribly long time, he was right. López's empire of horror began to crumble in 1980, not because of a big mistake, but a small slip. In the city of Ambato, Ecuador, he was seen trying to lead a young girl away from a market. A crowd formed, and he was lynched. The police rescued him from the mob and took him into custody. At that moment, he was just another suspect. But inside the cells, the other inmates, driven by a dark instinct, sensed there was something more in that quiet man. They attacked him, and to save himself, López made a shocking offer to the guard. In exchange for protection, he would confess everything. And then the silence was shattered by a torrent of horrors. He led investigators to mass graves. He described crimes with a coldness that terrified even the most seasoned officers. A photographic memory for evil. He remembered faces, clothes, locations. With every new grave uncovered, the count of victims grew. 50, 100, 150. He claimed to have started in Peru, killed dozens in Colombia, and hundreds in Ecuador. His final confession reached a number that is hard to even process, more than 350 murders. But here the story enters a foggy territory, because the truth about Pedro López is built on the word of a liar and serial killer. Peruvian and Colombian authorities with limited resources were only able to verify a fraction of his confessions. Many of the places he described were inaccessible, many bodies unrecognizable. The confirmed figure of 110 victims is horrifying on its own, yet worlds away from 300. So what is the truth? Was López a storyteller, feeding his own legend? Or did bureaucracy and the harsh geography of the Andes simply hide the true scale of his massacre? In 1983, an Ecuadorian court, based on the strongest evidence available, convicted him for the murder of 110 girls. The sentence, 16 years in prison. A sentence that for many sounded like a screaming injustice compared to the magnitude of his crimes. And the story doesn't end there. In fact, it reaches its most frustrating and mysterious chapter. In 1998, Pedro Alonso López was released. The circumstances are murky. Some say he served his full sentence. Others say he was freed for good behavior and later deported to Colombia. What is known is that once on Colombian soil, he was supposed to remain in custody inside a psychiatric hospital. But in 1999, after a controversial report deemed him sane, he was released. And since then, nothing. Pedro Alonso López vanished. Some believe he died, perhaps at the hands of victims' families who never forgot. Others speculate he assumed a new identity and lives an anonymous life in some remote place. And there are those who fear the worst, that the monster of the Andes returned to his old routine, silently adding numbers to his macabre list. The legend of Pedro Alonso López is a nightmare that remains alive, not because of the confirmations, but because of the doubts, because of the hundreds of families, especially among indigenous communities, who never had a body to mourn or a grave to visit. His story is a grim reminder of how darkness can thrive in society's blind spots, in indifference, in the difficulty of seeing the suffering of the invisible. And you, what do you think? Is the monster of the Andes dead, or is he a ghost still walking among us, hidden in plain sight? Are the 300 victims real, or part of the mythology crafted by a killer? Share your theories in the comments. And if this story touched you, pass it on. Sometimes keeping memory alive is the only justice possible.